Imagine, imagine you're driving a car down this massive, totally straight highway at like 100 miles an hour.
Okay, flying.
Right, flying. And if you want to push the limits and go faster, the obvious answer is, well, you just press the pedal closer to the floor.
Just give it more gas, yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
But what happens when the pedal is already bottomed out? Like what happens when the engine is literally maxed out and physically cannot give you another drop of speed?
You're at the absolute limit.
Right. If you still want to push boundaries, you can't just add more acceleration. You have to start taking the engine apart and totally redesigning how combustion works.
While the car is still moving.
Yes, while the car is still flying down the highway.
That's a perfect way to visualize the exact moment in musical history we're exploring today. You reach this point where quantitative expansion.
Like just adding more.
Yeah, just adding more, playing faster, turning the amp up louder. It completely hits a physical wall, and that forces this really terrifying but thrilling kind of innovation.
Which brings us to the actual subject of our deep dive today. We're looking at this highly analytical, incredibly dense column by an author known as Mr.
Published by Monumental Movement Records, right?
Yep, exactly. And the focus is avant-garde and experimental metal. But if you are listening to this right now and thinking, well, I don't listen to metal, I definitely don't listen to experimental metal, I'm out, please, stick around.
Oh, yeah, you do not need to be a metalhead for this.
Not at all. Because this is not an exploration of how to listen to screaming and distortion. The mission here is really a master class in how you take an incredibly rigid, established system.
A system with very strict, unbending rules.
Right, and how you completely redesign its structural physics from the inside out.
And that is a framework you can apply to literally any field, any industry, any creative endeavor. Because usually when people hear the phrase avant-garde metal or really any experimental music, the immediate assumption is that it's just musicians trying to be, as shocking or eccentric or loud as humanly possible.
Right. The assumption is that it's purely about emotional excess.
Yeah.
Or just chaos. Chaos is the word that always comes to my mind. It just sounds like a blender full of silverware.
A blender full of silverware, exactly. But what this analysis so brilliantly unpacks is that this is a complete misconception.
Okay.
The true nature of this specific movement is not about volume. It's not about playing a million notes a minute. It is this deliberate, highly calculated dismantling of the underlying grammar of music itself.
The grammar of music.
Yeah. The reason this music feels so difficult or jarring or chaotic to a first-time listener isn't because they're just making noise. It's because the invisible structural scaffolding that your brain unconsciously relies on to make sense of sound.
That scaffolding has been quietly removed.
Exactly, while you are still standing on top of the building.
Wow. Okay, so to understand how you tear down a building without it just collapsing into a pile of rubble,
yeah,
we first have to understand how the building was constructed in the first place.
You're right. The baseline rules.
Right. Yeah, the baseline rules. If we look at traditional heavy metal, there are very specific structural premises that govern the whole genre according to this source.
And they are deeply, deeply ingrained. First, time signatures are stable and perceptible. So even if it's super heavy and aggressive, it's usually in a standard 4/4 time.
You can tap your foot to it.
Exactly. You can tap your foot. Second, the heavy beats. So, the kick drum, the snare crack, they act as anchor points for time. They tell you exactly where you are in the measure.
Okay, makes sense.
Third, the songs have a circular structure. They build up, they have a chorus, a bridge, a solo, and they are always aiming for a recognizable climax.
And then there's the fourth rule, which honestly, this might be the most crucial one. The repeating riff.
Yes.
The analysis refers to the repeating riff as creating a sense of gravity.
Yeah.
Right? I just want to pause on that because it's such a brilliant way to describe it.
It really is.
Think of a classic heavy metal song. That chugging, repeating guitar line is what gives the song its mass. It pulls you in. Like when you're headbanging at a concert, your neck muscles are actually anticipating the beat because the gravity of that repeating riff is so predictable.
Right. It creates an incredibly reliable physics engine. The listener knows exactly how the world operates.
It's totally like a classic action movie. The repeating riff is your hero's journey, It grounds you, it tells you who to follow, and it always comes back around.
Oh, I love that analogy. And the drum beat.
The heavy drum beat is the ticking clock. It's driving the momentum forward, giving you a sense of urgency. And that circular structure aiming for a climax. That is the final explosion before the credits roll.
The good guy wins, the building blows up.
Exactly. You know exactly how the gravity works in that world. You rely on those physics to enjoy the ride.
But, and here's the catch, those physics eventually hit a ceiling. If we trace the historical timeline from the source, traditional extreme music, specifically genres like death metal, they went through this period of rapid, massive expansion from the late 1980s through the early 1990s.
But it was purely a quantitative expansion, right? It was just like more.
Completely. The whole arms race was just about pushing the physical limits of speed, sound pressure, and density. Like, how incredibly fast can the drummer play blast beats?
Right.
How low can we tune the guitars so they literally sound like an earthquake? How thick and dense can we make the production? But eventually, humans can only move their wrists so fast.
Yeah. Amps can only get so loud before the sound wave literally just distorts into white noise.
Exactly.
And that is the saturation point. That's the pedal hitting the floor of the car we talked about at the start. And this was the massive aha moment for me when looking at this material.
Yeah.
You literally cannot play faster or heavier. So what do you do?
Right. Where do you go from there?
The artists who birthed avant-garde metal realized that to move forward, they couldn't just break the speedometer. They had to take a massive step back and question the very structural conditions that made heavy and fast possible in the first place.
They stopped asking, how do we make this heavier? And started asking a much more terrifying question, what actually is heavy?
So how do you answer that? How do you dismantle the engine? We have two incredible case studies from the column here that take completely different approaches to solving this problem. Let's dive into the first approach, which is destruction.
Okay.
The prime example here is a band called Gorguts. And what is so vital to understand about Gorguts is that they did not try to invent something new by bringing in outside genres. Like they didn't start playing jazz saxophones or, I don't know, bringing in classical violins.
No, they are purists in a really strange way. They use the exact same sonic vocabulary of death metal, the distorted guitars, the aggressive vocals, the double bass drums, but they use them to destroy death metal from the inside out. They basically became architects of destruction.
So let's look at the actual mechanics of this destruction. To go back to our earlier concept, they intentionally redesigned their guitar riffs to completely reject gravity. But, I mean, how does that actually work? Because a riff without gravity sounds like a paradox. A riff is gravity.
It is a paradox, and that's the genius of it. There are specific design principles at play here. First, they make the musical phrases uneven, so there's no reliable 4/4 cycle where you can nod your head.
Okay, so the beat is weird.
Yeah. Second, and this is deeply unsettling to the human brain, the pitch relationships have absolutely no resolution.
Let me stop you there because we really need to explain what that feels like. Musical resolution is everything to us.
It's huge. Yeah.
Like, if you sing Happy Birthday and you just stop on the second to last word, like Happy Birthday to...
Silence.
Yeah. Your brain physically aches for that final note. That final note is the resolution. It tells your brain, okay, the journey is over, we are safe.
Exactly. Now imagine a musical environment where that final note never comes. Ever.
Oh, man.
You are left hanging in a state of permanent tension. And to compound that, Gorguts treats the beginning and the end of a musical phrase as completely equal.
Which destroys the momentum. The riff stops being a device to move the song forward toward a destination. The analysis describes it as an instantaneous cross-section.
Yes.
So instead of riding a roller coaster, it's like a strobe light flashing in a dark room. You just see a frozen, chaotic cross-section of the room, then another, and then another. You aren't going anywhere. You are just suspended in it.
And that lack of forward motion has massive consequences for the listener.
Okay, I am going to push back here. Hard.
Go for it.
Because if you take away the forward momentum and there's no resolution, so I'm constantly tense, and the phrases are uneven, and the beginning and the end of the riff are identical, how is that not just completely random noise? Like, if I put this on, how am I supposed to process it as music? It genuinely sounds like a mistake.
That is the exact trap. That is what 99% of people think when they hear it, and it's why this analysis is so crucial. It sounds random, but it is actually mathematically rigorous.
Really?
It is the opposite of random. It's what's described here as a beat sensation dismantling rhythm.
Okay, beat sensation dismantling. That is a mouthful. Unpack that mechanism for me.
Think about what a drummer usually does. They keep the time. They highlight the heavy beat so you can find the groove, right?
Right.
In this music, the time signature is technically still there. If you look at the sheet music, the math adds up perfectly. But the drummer is actively playing against your ability to feel it.
Wait, so if I'm driving in my car tapping my fingers on the steering wheel to the radio, trying to find the 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right, finding the pulse.
The drummer in Gorguts is intentionally dropping heavy snare hits on the offbeats, doing these weird syncopations to ensure I can never figure out where the 1 is.
Yes, they are actively hiding the breadcrumbs. The structure is objectively mathematically present, but your subjective ability to intuitively feel it is being systematically dismantled in real time.
That is wild. It's almost hostile to the listener, but like in a highly intelligent way.
Exactly.
If we look at the specific albums that illustrate this, their album Obscura is the ultimate manifestation of this. The source basically calls it a massive laboratory experiment.
It really is.
It's an environment where dissonance,
Yeah.
those clashing tense notes that usually sound wrong to us, dissonance is so thoroughly normalized that the very concepts of tension and release just vanish.
Because if everything is tense, nothing is tense. There is no hierarchy between the riffs anymore. One part of the song isn't more important or building toward a climactic chorus because the traditional architecture of a song simply doesn't exist.
It's just a flat landscape of pure dissonance.
Right.
But they didn't stay in that space of total, absolute deconstruction. Because, you can't really go anywhere once you've atomized the building.
Which is why their subsequent album, From Wisdom to Hate, is such a vital transition point in the text. Gorguts takes this complete structural deconstruction from Obscura and begins to wrangle it.
They reined it a bit.
Yeah, they partially control the chaos. They reintroduce just a tiny sliver of structural readability.
It's like they spend years tearing the skyscraper down to its literal atoms. And then, when it's just a blank lot, they decided to assemble exactly one window frame and leave it hovering in midair, just to show you they have the mastery to do it.
That is a fantastic visual, yes.
It's this balance between complete dismantling and a highly selective return to order. So Gorguts represents the path of structural destruction. You take the rules and you shatter them. But that is only one way to solve the problem of the 1990s wall.
Right, there's another path.
Yeah, there is a completely different parallel approach to breaking the rules, and it involves internalization and layering. This brings us to the second major case study, a band called Maudlin of the Well. If Gorguts is about taking a sledgehammer to the physics engine, Maudlin of the Well is about running 3 different physics engines at the exact same time.
They approach the grammar of music through multiple simultaneous timelines. Instead of a single unified track moving from point A to point B, they stack realities on top of each other.
It's basically the multiverse of extreme music.
Exactly. You have layers operating independently. So you might have metal time, where guitars are playing something heavy and rhythmic. Simultaneously, you have chamber music time, maybe acoustic guitars or horns playing at a completely different pace.
Oh, wow.
And beneath that, ambient time, just floating atmospheric sounds that have no rhythm at all.
But hold on. If you stack a heavy metal track, a classical quartet, and an ambient drone on top of each other,
Yeah.
isn't that just a mashup? Like, don't they eventually have to sync up and blend into one cohesive sound?
No, and that is the most crucial mechanism of their approach. These layers are never fully integrated. They coexist in the same audio file, but they maintain a constant, deliberate misalignment.
They don't match up.
Right, they are running parallel to each other, maintaining their own entirely separate pacing and internal logic.
Okay, logistically, how on earth does the band play that? Because if I'm the drummer and I have a guitarist playing at 120 beats per minute and a horn section playing at 70 beats per minute, my brain would short circuit trying to keep it all together.
Well, it fundamentally changes the role of the rhythm section entirely. In traditional music, the drums are the time manager. They are the ticking clock. But in Maudlin of the Rem, well, the rhythm isn't based on a strict metronome or click track at all. It's based on the length of breathing or spoken words.
That is so deeply fascinating. The rhythm is breathing.
Yeah.
A metronome's a machine, right? It ticks rigidly.
Yeah.
But a breath has a natural swell. It expands, it holds for a microsecond, it exhales, it contracts. If the rhythm section is playing to the tempo of a human breath, the tempo feels like a living organism.
And because they are breathing rather than ticking, the drums are freed from their time management duties. Their job shifts entirely. They are no longer there to tell you what the beat is. Their job is to adjust the spatial density of the music.
Spatial density? Meaning what, exactly? Like how much sound is filling the room?
Precisely. The drums decide how crowded or how empty the environment feels at any given microsecond. So a flurry of blast beats might make the space feel intensely claustrophobic and tight.
Yeah, like the walls are closing in.
Exactly. But then a few sparse, echoing cymbal hits suddenly make the space feel vast, like a massive cavern. They are shaping the three-dimensional space of the song, not tracking the linear time.
Which totally changes how you experience their albums.
Right.
Take their album Bath. We see aggressive metal sections and incredibly quiet, fragile chamber music parts existing inside the exact same song, completely separated.
Right.
You aren't experiencing a linear song structure. You aren't riding that roller coaster to a drop. You are moving through what the analysis calls psychological space.
It's architectural. You are basically walking through different rooms in a massive, strange house.
And then on their album, Leaving Your Body Map, this idea reaches its peak. The concept of a musical climax, that big explosion at the end of the action movie we talked about, it just vanishes entirely.
Because if the song is no longer a linear journey toward a destination, a climax makes no sense. The structure of the song becomes merely a transition between different states of being.
Right.
You aren't building up to a grand finale. You are just shifting from one emotional or atmospheric state into another, fluidly.
It is such a radically different way to experience sound. So we have these two colossal pillars from the source, Gorguts and Maudlin of the Well. And what's so helpful here is looking at how they relate to each other. Because instinctually, you'd think they are opposites.
You would think so, yeah.
Like one is pure dissonant destruction, the other is this floating, multi-layered, breathing organism. But they aren't opposites, are they?
Not at all. They are different coordinates on the exact same structural axis. They both hit that 1990s wall of speed and volume, and they both decided to dismantle the structural premises of heavy metal. They just used different tools.
Let's look at those tools. Gorguts uses dismantling, rupture, and dissonance. It's described as their structural armor. They build a fortress out of broken rules, making it incredibly hard to penetrate, but mathematically brilliant once you're inside.
On the other hand, Maudlin of the Well uses layering, parallel time, and dissonance as spatial staging. They don't build a fortress, they build an ever-shifting landscape of different realities. One breaks the physics engine, the other runs three different physics engines simultaneously.
And if we zoom out and look at the broader evolutionary timeline of extreme music provided by the author, we can see exactly why this structural rebellion matters so much today.
The timeline is incredibly illuminating. We had the late 80s, which was all about that rapid quantitative expansion, faster, louder, heavier.
The arms race.
Right. Then the early 90s introduced odd meters and complex time signatures. Bands were figuring out they could bend the rules.
But bending wasn't enough to sustain innovation.
Right. So the late 90s is when we hit this era of true structural dismantling, led by pioneers like Gorguts. They didn't bend the rules, they shattered them. And by clearing away that old scaffolding, they laid the groundwork for the 2000s, which became an era of introspective spatial structures, the Maudlin of the Well approach.
And all of this leads directly into the 2010s and beyond, up to right now. Today, this kind of structural thinking isn't even considered avant-garde anymore. It has become a normalized, everyday part of the vocabulary for musicians.
What was once a total, shocking rebellion against the very fabric of music has simply become a foundational tool in the toolbox. The avant-garde basically became the architecture.
And this brings us right back to you listening to this deep dive right now. Because whether you are a diehard metalhead or you only listen to classical piano, or honestly, you never plan on listening to a single note of avant-garde music in your life.
Which is fair.
Right. But the core philosophy hidden in this music is profound. This entire evolution proves a fundamental truth about innovation. True innovation rarely comes from just doing the exact same thing you're already doing, just slightly faster or slightly louder or with a bigger budget.
No, it does.
Quantitative expansion always hits a wall. You will always press the pedal to the floor eventually.
It is the most important takeaway. True innovation only happens when you are willing to step back and interrogate the invisible rules governing the system you are operating in. You have to ask, why are we doing it this way in the first place?
The ultimate thesis we are left with is this. Avant-garde metal was never a movement to make music more extreme.
No, it is the continuous, ongoing act of questioning the very conditions that allow music to exist at all. It is a philosophy of structural inquiry masquerading as heavy metal.
It is taking the engine apart while the car is driving.
That's
So,
it.
I want to leave you with a thought today, something to really chew on as you go about your week. Think about the structures that you rely on every single day.
The ones you don't even notice.
Exactly. Maybe it's your workflow at your job, the way you structure your meetings. Maybe it's your daily morning routine. Or maybe it's just the media you consume, the predictable arcs of the shows you watch.
We all have them.
You probably depend on certain beats and predictable resolutions to get through the day without even realizing it. The 9 to 5 workday is a time signature. The weekend is the musical resolution. They are the gravity keeping your feet on the floor.
It's your personal physics engine.
But what if you were to apply the Gorguts or the Maudlin of the Well approach to your own life? If you stepped back and really analyzed the underlying grammar of your daily routine, which of your foundational rules would you suddenly realize are actually completely optional? And what entirely new space could you create for yourself if you bravely decided to dismantle them? Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning the structures around you, and we will catch you next time.